Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on this week's video. On this week's video, we're continuing with our ongoing series entitled The QME's Championship Playbook. And we're nearing the end of this program, and we're finishing up with a discussion about how the very best qualified medical evaluators go about constructing and submitting their reports so that their report actually impresses the reader of the report. And in the first section of this section of this program, we talked about how to set up the introductory section of your report so that your report clearly demonstrates to the reader of the report your compliance with the labor codes and regulations that govern the face-to-face evaluation and the submission of your QME report. And that's a critical consideration in your report. Your report, among other things, should clearly demonstrate to the reader of the report that you know the codes and regulations that govern the face-to-face evaluation and the submission of your report, and that you complied with the codes and regulations in the face-to-face evaluation and that govern the submission of your report. Your report is a perfect opportunity for you to demonstrate that you complied with the rules. And then in our very last session, we talked about how to spice up your report and how to create visual appeal with your report so that it captures and captivates the attention of the reader of your report. As you know, as we know, readers are very quickly bored. And so it's important that our report have visual appeal and visual pizzazz in order to sustain the reader's attention from start to finish of the report. And we talked specifically about how to add pizzazz to the history, the relevant medical history, the social history, and the review of records sections of your report. So in today's discussion, I want to continue along the same theme about how to add curb appeal, how to add visual appeal, and how to make your report really pop to the eye of the reader. And I want to specifically focus today on the more technical aspects of our report in the sections of our report entitled Current Symptoms, the Symptom Questionnaires and Activities of Daily Living Assessment, the Physical Examination sections of our report, and then finally the Diagnostic Study sections of our report. And then in our very next recording, we'll finish up this program and we'll talk about how to add pizzazz to the final portion of your report, which is the opinion section of your report. If you recall, in our last session, we talked about how your QME report is divided up into three basic sections. The initial section of your report, which we talked about in our first recording, is the get to know the examinee section of the report. That includes the introduction, the history, the relevant medical history, and the social history. It's in these sections of the report that we get to know the examinee. We get to know their history, we get to know their medical history, we get to know their social history, and we get to spend some time in the life of the examinee. And we get to know the situation that the examinee's in, we get to know their daily circumstances, we get to know their life circumstances, and that's the section of the report, sort of the get to know the examinee section. Well, part two of your report is the more technical aspects of your report. And it begins with the review of records, continues on with the physical examination and the diagnostic studies, etc. And it's in these sections of the report where we're presenting technical data and large volumes of data. So it's important that these technical sections of the report be presented in a way that appeal to the eye of the reader and that present information, technical information, in a way that's clear, in a way that's organized, and in a way that's easily understood by the lay audience, the non-doctor audience that's going to be reading the report. So we're going to talk some more about that in today's discussion. And then the third section of your report is the opinion and conclusion section of your report. and it's the opinion and conclusion sections of your report where we discuss causation, where we discuss permanent and stationary status, where we discuss any permanent impairment that the examinee may be left with, where we discuss the apportionment of the permanent impairment, if apportionment applies, future medical care, and then also finally work restrictions. So again, part 1 is get to know the examinee. Part 2 of your report is the technical sections and technical aspect of your report, and then part 3 of your report is the opinions and conclusions of the report. So today I want to focus on the technical section of your report, and I want to give you some quick suggestions and quick ideas that you can easily implement into your very next report to make your report infinitely better. Okay? So I want to begin today with a discussion of the current symptoms and the symptom questionnaires and activities of daily living assessment, and we'll handle those 2 sections of the report. And then ever so briefly we'll talk about the physical examination section of your report and the diagnostic studies section of your report, and those 2 discussions on the physical exam and diagnostic studies are going to be somewhat abbreviated because the physical examination section of your report could be an entire 6-hour discussion in and of itself based upon all the body parts that we could be presented with, but we'll just abbreviate the discussion and give some general principles in those 2 sections so that you have some take-home ideas that you can implement with your very next report. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble some materials, and I look forward to being back with you here in just a few moments. Okay, I'm back with you now, and I have some materials with me here. And in today's recording, we're going to continue with the theme that we've established in our prior 2 recordings, and that is we're going to review an actual report that I have for you here. And I'm going to be presenting the report to you in front of the camera like this, rather than presenting the report to you on the computer screen, which we could very easily do. But I'm going to be showing you the report here in front of the camera so that you can get a sense as to how these elements that we're talking about in the report lay out on the written page. You know, the reader of your report is most likely going to be reading your report in its hard copy format rather than viewing it electronically on the computer screen. So it's important that in hard copy format, your report look good. It should look perfect. The spacing should all be symmetric. There should be bolded heading for the major report element sections. There should be use of design elements such as tables, such as bulleted lists, such as underlining, such as italics to emphasize certain points. But these design elements should not be overdone to overwhelm the reader of the report. So I'm going to be showing you the report here in front of the camera so you can just see how it looks on the written page. And you may not be able to read specifically the items that we're referring to, but you will be able to see how it looks sort of on large scale and how it lays out on the paper and how that appeals visually to the eye of the reader. So I want to begin today talking about the section of your report entitled the Claimant Report of Symptoms. Claimant Report of Symptoms. Now, if this section sounds a lot like current complaints, Claimant Report of Symptoms, current complaints, it is. But we're replacing the word with complaints with report of symptoms. So this section of the report is entitled the Claimant Report of Symptoms. Now, many doctors do this section of the report differently. However, most doctors do send out an intake questionnaire to the examinee prior to the face-to-face evaluation. And this is a good place in the intake questionnaire to give the examinee an opportunity to explain to you the symptoms that they're having related to the industrial injury. And they can provide for you details about those symptoms. Now, what's important in this section is a couple things. Number one, that when you interview the examinee face-to-face, you review the symptoms that the examinee describes on the intake form, and you give the examinee an opportunity to elaborate on those symptoms with you in an interactive fashion during the face-to-face evaluation. And during this face-to-face interactive discussion between you and the examinee, it's important that you as the evaluating doctor get the examinee to focus on what's truly objective about their symptoms. Now, examinees are going to come to you with all manner of subjectivity, and doctors sometimes get focused on the examinee's subjectivity. And what's important is that we minimize the examinee's subjectivity and focus instead on what's truly objective about the examinee's report of symptoms. So I'm recommending that when you interactively work with the examinee, you get the examinee to focus away from subjective descriptions of pain, such as aching, burning, stabbing, tingling, throbbing, crushing, squeezing, searing, and all these subjective descriptions, and numeric descriptions as well, such as the pain is an 8 on a 10 scale, or a 9 on a 10 scale, or a 2 on a 10 scale, and all these subjective descriptions, but rather focus on the objective aspects of the pain and how the pain objectively impacts their activity. So it's important that when the examinee describe a certain pain that they're having in relation to their industrial injury, that you focus on how that pain impacts their activities, if at all. So we shift our emphasis from subjective to what's objective. Now the examinee, if you let them, will wax prolific on what's subjective. But I want you to focus on what's objective. So asking questions about how the pain impacts their activities at work and in their daily living gives you an objective idea as to the true severity, of the pain. So that's a major point. Focus on what's truly objective during the face-to-face interview with the examinee, and get the examinee to describe to you in their own words how the pain impacts their work activities and how the pain impacts their daily living activities. Okay? Rather than simply focusing on subjective criteria. So that's as much as I'll say about the current symptoms, Claimant Current Report of Symptoms. Okay? Now, in conjunction with the Claimant Report of Symptoms section of your report, we then move into the next section of the report, which are the Symptom Questionnaires and Activities of Daily Living Assessment section of the report. So these two sections are interrelated and flow one right into the next. So we have Claimant Report of Symptoms, which appears like this on the written page. Claimant Report of Symptoms. Here's the topic heading on the bottom of this page. And then we go on to the next page of the report, and it shows here a table wherein the claimant describes their symptoms and gives us a few details about what they consider the frequency and severity of the pain to be. and then some details about the pain and whether the pain is improved, whether the pain is staying the same, whether the pain is getting any worse. And then below all of that, which is simply taken off of the intake questionnaire, below that, you give the examinee in the face-to-face evaluation with you an opportunity to elaborate on those current complaints. So in this section right here, it says, Mr. Jones elaborated on his current complaints by describing, colon, and then you go back to the chart or the table wherein the examinee described his symptoms here, and you simply take off the table each of the symptoms. So here he says back pain, neck pain, and leg pain. And here in this section, you give him an opportunity to elaborate here on his neck pain. You give him an opportunity here to elaborate on his lower back pain. You give him an opportunity here to elaborate on his leg symptoms, here focusing on what's a truly objective regarding his symptoms in relation to the industrial injury. Okay? So once the symptoms are established in the Claimant Report of Symptoms section of your report, we then move into the Symptom Questionnaires and Activities of Daily Living assessment, wherein we further pursue and investigate those symptoms that the examinee described in the prior section. Okay? So herein begins the next section, which is the Symptom Questionnaires and Activities of Daily Living assessment section of the report. Now, in this section of the report, you're going to be describing the results of the symptom questionnaires that you provide to the examinee during the face-to-face evaluation, and you're going to be describing the activities of daily living assessment interview that you conduct with the examinee in the face-to-face evaluation. Now, symptom questionnaires and the activities of daily living assessment are typically done by most doctors immediately before the physical examination. So during the face-to-face interview with the examinee, you would first begin at the beginning of your report, and you would take the history. And then you would take the relevant medical history. And then you would take the social history. And then you would collect the Claimant Report of Symptoms. And then, before going into physical exam, you would give the examinee some symptom questionnaires, give the examinee the opportunity to complete the symptom questionnaires, and then go into the activities of daily living assessment prior to beginning the physical exam. Many doctors often take a break between the activities of daily living assessment and beginning the physical examination. This seems to be a good time for all the parties to get up and take a break, to stretch, to use the restroom, to get a drink of water or whatever. So, with regards to the symptom questionnaires, you're going to give the examinee the appropriate symptom questionnaires that correspond with the symptoms that they describe to you, both on their intake document and in the interactive discussion regarding those symptoms. And there's a variety of symptom questionnaires that we use, and there are some standard ones and there are some relatively rare ones. But whatever symptom questionnaires that you give to the examinee, the key point is, the important point with symptom questionnaires is that you review the symptom questionnaires with the examinee to make sure that the responses that the examinee gives you on the symptom questionnaires are true and accurate reflections of the examinee's actual condition. Now, many doctors do not do this. They simply hand the examinee symptom questionnaires and they accept completely the responses that the examinee gives on the symptom questionnaires as true and accurate. And you and I both know that many times there are inconsistencies between what we observe with the examinee and what the examinee checks on the symptom questionnaire responses. Okay, so for example, I have here one common popular symptom questionnaire that we use, which is the Revised Oswestry Low Back Pain Questionnaire. You're all familiar with this document, the Revised Oswestry Low Back Pain Questionnaire. When the examinee completes the questionnaire by circling the appropriate answer in each of the categories, it's your obligation as the evaluator to review that document and assess that document for accuracy. And if you find responses on the symptom questionnaire that are not accurate, that are not consistent with the history, or it's not consistent with your observation of the examinee, it's important that you have the examinee correct the document so that the end product document is a true reflection of the examinee's actual condition. Now, one of the areas where this is commonly where discrepancies are commonly encountered has to do with, for example, capacity for sitting. Okay, this is a lower back questionnaire here, and question number 5 asks the examinee about their capacity for sitting. Well, sometimes the examinee will circle an answer that's inconsistent with either your observation, or it's inconsistent with the history, etc. For example, the examinee may circle an answer that says, answer D here, pain prevents me from sitting more than a half an hour. Well, by the time the examinee gets to this portion of the evaluation, we've usually been sitting for 60 minutes, sometimes 90 minutes, sometimes even as many as 120 minutes by the time they get to this questionnaire. So if you see that they've circled answer D that says pain prevents me from sitting more than half an hour, you would simply say, Mrs. Jones, on the sitting question, I see that you circled here, pain prevents me from sitting more than half an hour. Is that true? And Mrs. Jones will say, yes, that's true. And you'll come back and you'll say, well, Mrs. Jones, we've been sitting here together for 90 minutes. And you indicate here that pain prevents me from sitting more than half an hour. And she'll say, well, that's true. I have pain after sitting more than half an hour. And you would simply educate them as to what the true question asks them by telling her that, Mrs. Jones, the question is not whether or not you have pain. The question says that pain prevents you from sitting more than half an hour. Now, are you having pain now as you're sitting here? And she'll say, yes, I am. And you'll say, but Mrs. Jones, the pain does not prevent you from sitting. I understand that you have pain, but in actuality, the pain that you're having does not prevent you from sitting for more than half an hour, because we've been sitting here for 90 minutes. Do you agree? And she will have a revelation. She'll have a revelation that you're not simply referring to the presence of pain, but you're searching for how the pain impacts her ability to sit. And she will realize that even though she has pain, pain does not prevent her from sitting for more than half an hour, and you get her to circle the response on the questionnaire that's actually the true and accurate response to the question. And you do that with every single question of every single questionnaire that you provide to the examinee, so that by the time the examinee is done with symptom questionnaires, the questionnaires are a true and accurate reflection of their actual condition. Now, examinees, you can count on this as a principle. Examinees will overstate their limitations with activities of daily living. They will overstate their symptoms subjectively. So it's up to us as doctors to educate them and guide them to the answers of the questions that are correct, that are true and accurate reflections of their actual condition. You know, that's our obligation as evaluators, is to serve as an intermediary between the examinee and the parties and decipher for the parties what it is that the examinee is saying, so that by the time we relay it to the parties are getting a true description of the examinee's actual description. They rely on us to be a translator like that. So it's important that you review every single questionnaire with the examinee so that the questionnaires are actually accurate, okay? Without you reviewing the questionnaires with the examinee, the responses on the questionnaire many times are not accurate. They're not true. They're simply overstatements of subjectivity from the examinee, okay? Now, once the symptom questionnaires are all completed and all corrected and handed back in, you're then going to go into the activities of daily living assessment section of the report. Now, before we talk about that, let me just say a couple more words about the symptom questionnaires. With the symptom questionnaires, okay, so we're in the activities of daily living assessment and symptom questionnaires section of the report. With regards to the symptom questionnaires, you're then going to summarize and synopsize the results of the symptom questionnaires for the reader of the report. Now, it's important that in this section you not recapitulate the entirety of every single symptom questionnaire, but you simply extract from the questionnaire those responses that you consider relevant to your evaluation. So for example, with regards to the revised Oswestry-Loback questionnaire, in the report, the synopsis of that would look as follows. So here, we're reviewing the symptom questionnaires. It says symptom questionnaires, and there's several questionnaires that are reviewed here. We have a pain drawing diagram that's reviewed, the revised Oswestry, which is reviewed, the neck disability index, which is reviewed. So with regards to the revised Oswestry questionnaire, we simply review, in this case, 3 of the questions. Okay, the revised Oswestry has 10 questions, 10 boxes. I simply review with the reader of the report 3 of the responses. So for example, here's the summary. It says, revised Oswestry-Loback questionnaire, : Mr. Jones scored himself 25. The range is 0 to 50, with higher scores indicative of greater impact of symptoms on the ability to complete activities of daily living. He indicated, for example, that : pain intensity, which is question number 1. Pain intensity. The pain is moderate and does not vary much. Sitting. Pain prevents me from sitting more than an hour. Changing degree of pain. My pain is gradually worsening. And we simply summarize 3 out of the 10 questions which become relevant later on in the report in providing our opinions and conclusions. It's not necessary to recapitulate the responses on all 10 questions. We simply summarize and synopsize it for the reader by extracting from the document those sections that are relevant later for our opinions and conclusions. Do you get it? You don't summarize the whole thing. You simply summarize those parts that are relevant. Okay? And that goes for each and every one of the questionnaires. So the principle is, do not recapitulate the entirety of the symptom questionnaire. Nobody needs that, all that extraneous information. And doing that is just simply obnoxious. It's not necessary. And it occupies space on the page, and it occupies time, and it occupies brain space of the reader, and it's not necessary. So simply summarize the symptom questionnaires. Now, once the symptom questionnaires are all summarized, then we go into the activities of daily living assessment. So that's this subheading right here, the activities of daily living assessment. Now, during the activities of daily living assessment, you're going to get an idea as to how the symptoms that the examinee is reporting impact their ability to do various activities that are described in Table 1.2 of the AMA guides. Now, doctors do this many different ways. Many doctors send out a questionnaire to the examinee prior to the face-to-face evaluation and ask the examinee to complete that form. And doctors simply accept the responses that the examinee provides as true and accurate descriptions of their actual condition. Well, let me tell you something. The examinee's responses are always overstated. Let me say that again. Examinees will always overstate their limitations on activities of daily living. It's your job, and we hired you, and it's your obligation to come up with true limitations to activities of daily living, and this cannot be done by way of a checkbox form. It can only be done in an interactive interview during the face-to-face evaluation. So it must be done during the face-to-face evaluation. Now, the activities of daily living assessment section of your report is as important as the physical exam section of your report. It's as important. As you know, when we get later into the permanent impairment section of your report, the AMA guides place as much emphasis on limitations to activities of daily living as they do on objective physical examination findings. So permanent impairment ratings are based upon two things: objective physical examination findings on one hand, and limitations to activities of daily living on the other hand. And the AMA guides clearly tell us that an examinee who does not have limitations to activities of daily living does not qualify for permanent impairment. Now, what you're going to find if you do this interview correctly, you're going to find that examinees have very few limitations to activities of daily living. They'll say that they have limitations to activities of daily living, but what they're reporting to you is their misunderstanding of the concept. Examinees will report to you that they have pain with activities of daily living, and you're after whether or not examinees have limitations to activities of daily living. And pain during activity and limitation with activity are different things. And even though examinees may have pain, may have subjective pain that we cannot measure, that we cannot see, that we cannot feel, they may have subjective statements of pain with activities of daily living, objectively, we can see that the pain does not interfere with their ability to perform the activity, which is a non-impairing condition. Non-impairing. The guides clearly tell us that if there's no interference with activities of daily living, that qualifies for 0% impairment. So the activities of daily living assessment must be done in the face-to-face evaluation. And it would go something like this. Mrs. Jones, we're going to shift gears a little bit. And before we get into the physical exam, I just want to ask you a few more questions about the symptoms that you're having. And we call this our activities of daily living assessment. And I'm going to be asking you some questions about how your right shoulder pain, or how your lower back pain, or how your left hip pain may impact or interfere with your ability to do various activities that you might encounter during a typical day. Okay? So the first category of activities that I want to ask you about has to do with self-care and personal hygiene. Okay? Self-care and personal hygiene. So let me ask you, Mrs. Jones, with regards to your right shoulder and the pain that you're having in your right shoulder, does the pain in your right shoulder in any way interfere with your ability to use the bathroom for urination? and she will tell you. And responses can vary. And the examinee will give you many descriptions of subjective responses. For example, the examinee may say, no. Okay? And you'll go on to the next one. And you'll say, does your shoulder pain in any way interfere with your ability to use the bathroom for defecation? And the examinee may say, oh yes. Yes, when I use the bathroom for defecation, because of the pain in my shoulder, I have a difficult time cleaning myself. They will give you a subjective description that you have no way to be able to objectively corroborate or validate. Correct? You cannot go into their bathroom and experience firsthand their difficulty with cleaning themselves after defecation. How do you follow up on this? Remember, we're after what's truly objective, not what's subjective, what the examinee will tell you. We're after what's truly objective. So the follow-up question to that is, oh, you have pain with reaching to clean yourself after defecation. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I understand. Well, let me ask you, are you able to clean yourself, or do you have to have assistance with this? Does someone have to come in and help you with this? And the examinee will tell you in 100% of cases, they will tell you, oh no, I mean, it hurts, but I'm able to do it. And sometimes I have to use my other hand, but no, I don't have to get assistance. It's painful, but I'm able to do it. And what's truly objective here? What's truly objective is, despite their subjective statements of pain, limitations, lost range of motion, whatever, they are able to complete the activity, and they actually have no limitation to the activity. And so you go through each and every one of the activities one by one in an interactive interview with the examinee to find out what true limitations to activities of daily living that they may have, remembering all the while that examinees will tend to overstate their limitations because they don't understand the distinction between pain with activity and limitation with activity. Okay? So the activities of daily living assessment section of your report, as I said, is equally as important as the physical exam. And so it's important that you present the information to the reader in a way that organizes the information pleasingly to the eye and makes it easy for the reader of the report to quickly scan the activities of daily living assessment and pick out the necessary information. So I'm recommending that you set it up in tabular format, as this table clearly indicates. The first major subject heading here is self-care and personal hygiene activities, and all of those activities are listed below. So here's urinating, defecating, brushing hair, combing teeth, bathing, dressing oneself, etc. And the examinee's response would go in the next cell in the table. And in this assessment, basically the examinee was not limited in any way with urination, defecation, brushing teeth, etc. And all of those responses go here in the table format to the right of the activity, which is here. Okay? And then you would simply continue with communication activities, with physical activities, and all the activities of daily living that are described in Table 1.2 of the AMA guides. Okay? And then at the end of that section, you're going to provide the reader of the report a summary. So here's the continuation of the table. And then you're going to provide the reader with a summary of the symptom questionnaires and a summary of the activities of daily living. And herein you provide the reader your translation of what they told you during the symptom questionnaires and during the activities of daily living assessment. So let me just read this for you from this particular report. It says, the results of the symptom questionnaires and the activities of daily living assessment indicate that Mr. Jones considers his neck and back pain symptoms to be mildly to moderately impairing, mostly due to the near constant pain in the lower back. He is able to perform his work and daily living activities, including 10 maintenance customers as a side job on the weekends, without assistance, but he makes self-modifications to most activities to avoid bending the lower back. Is that a fascinating summary of all that went on in the symptom questionnaires and the activities of daily living? Despite the constant pain in his back, despite his report of neck pain, both of which he considers to be moderately impairing, he's still able to complete all of his daily living and work activities, including 10 maintenance customers on the weekends. Above and beyond his normal Monday to Friday work, he has 10 maintenance customers on the weekends for which he does maintenance. But he self-modifies his activities in order to avoid bending the lower back. So even though he has pain, he's actually pretty busy. Even though he has pain, he's actually able to do quite a lot. Even though he has subjective complaints of pain, including nearly constant pain in his back, it does not prevent him from being able to do his work activities, his daily living activities, and his weekend extra income activities, including 10 landscape customers as a side job. So provide the reader with a summary of the activities of daily living assessment so that the reader can get a good idea as to the examinee's true condition. Okay? So those two sections, the Claimant Report of Symptoms and the Symptom Questionnaires and Activities of Daily Living Assessment, by the time those two sections of the report are completed, the reader of the report has an accurate picture, a mental image picture of the examinee's true condition. Now, what is the mental image picture of this examinee that we get? We get a mental image picture in our mind of an examinee who is able to work 40 hours a week, is able to do all of his work functions 40 hours per week, and then on the weekends he's able to be pretty busy with 10 maintenance customers of his own. So this tells us that this examinee is working Monday through Sunday, at least 8 hours a day, moving quite quickly, but making some self-modifications, so he says, to avoid bending his back. Okay? And so now the reader has a mental image picture of an accurate description of this examinee.